Alrighty, greetings everybody, this is Chronological Dot. Today I'm going to show you how to control linear. I think it's very important that you have a good understanding of how linear works, and that way you can do a lot of really nifty things with it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is start out with a blur. I tend to start out with this quite frequently, and it just gives us a general shape to work with. I'm going to take the X and multiply it by 0.5 so it shrinks the blur in half there. Then we're going to take a linear, and the first thing we're going to do is change the post transform on it. Now consider kind of the pre and the post transforms very similar to the linear. They're almost the same thing because the only thing they actually do is make a spatial transformation that is, well, very linear in general. They don't, they can rotate it, they can move it, but they don't invert space like most of the other transforms will do. So the first thing we're going to do with the post transformation is move it up. Now, as you'll notice, every time we move it up, these get moved up. And what are these? Well, these are iterations that come through the chaos mode. You see the linear, how it goes back to itself. If I turn this off, we would only get one of these. But if we turn it back on, that means every time I go back to the linear, it goes back to itself, and it keeps going and going and going on and on. Now, what if every time we go through the linear, we shrink it by, we'll make it 0.6. A little small, make it 0.7. You notice that every time it goes through it, it gets smaller and smaller because it's going back through the linear transform. I'm going to drop it down a little bit so you can see it. Yeah, it disappears off to infinity. It makes notice that when we change the size and we make the shift here actually gets smaller. It doesn't go up the same amount. It goes up a smaller degree, and why that is because each one of these, you can consider each one of these in its own relative reference frame, so to speak. And you're going to see how that works in a moment. How about we change this to about 15? What's going to happen here is that each one of these in its own reference frame is going to be turned 15 degrees from the starting position that it was at. Voila, get a 15-degree turn. Now, make this a little bit more interesting. I'm going to offset it a little bit. So we kind of have a branch going here. We'll thin out our blur so we can see how that's working. See, makes a nice little curve off. Now, what happens if I were to do it the other way? We'll add another linear, and this time, but first I'm going to prevent it from going back to the first linear. I don't want you to see that just yet. Alrighty, so we'll do the same thing. We're going to take it, move it up, 1.5, rotate it by 15, shrink it down to about 0.7, so you can see how it's working. Okay, same idea. It kind of goes off, curls off. Now what happens if after I go through this transformation, I go back and do this transformation? What's going to happen here is that each one of these, remember, each one of these is its own reference frame. So we're going to get this picture here going off of this one. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to go from this linear here, and we're going to go to the other linear. Actually, it's this one first, because we're talking about this one. We're going to go to the other one. Whoop, okay, wrong side. So every time I went through this one and I go back through here, this linear then transforms it. So now we get a subtree, and it keeps going off and off and on. And of course you can imagine what happens when you go to the other way. You get a full tree. That's pretty cool. Now there's one other trick I'd like to show you here, and that's thinking a little bit outside the box. What if we were to take this and rotate it around the axis, the y-axis? For that, we go to post rotate y, and what you want to see is this here is going to come out of the board, so to speak, or out of the screen. So we do about 0.1. Move it here. It doesn't look like much right now, but if we go here and we click preserve Z, it's not going to work there. What it should ideally be doing here is that it's going to turn each of these subtrees, and each one of these is going to come out. And you can see this a bit better by rotating it. But for that, I'm going to add a linear, and then I'm going to post-rotate around the X so that you can actually see it from the top. There we go. As you can see, it makes a nice turn shape. It keeps turning it around the axis via each iteration. That's pretty cool. So we keep doing it, and we get it to look more like a tree. And of course, you're free to try out post-rotate X, post-rotate, post-spin Z. Post-spin Z is really fun, but you can't really see it until it's rotated with another one. And that's linear for you guys.